Am I worried that this is finally the thing that is going to replace me? No, I'm not. I just don't choose to operate that way.
Right.
If the conditions require me to be better, I will be better.
Hello and welcome to Keeping It Real, the podcast where we talk to the most interesting people in real estate. And we're back with another one live in person. I love these ones because the energy here is always so good. So we're here with Theresa Bastian. All right. So we were talking about, this is a little bit of a like right into it thing.
Sure.
Because you and I have been chatting, before the cameras were rolling, basically about what's going on with the NAR settlement.
Right.
And you're a small broker.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think also this one might get a little bit spicy because, you've got some hot takes on what's happening in the broader U.S. economy. So let's just start drilling in here and start with what's your take on what's going on with NAR?
Okay, so that question seems so simple, and there are so many levels.
Yeah.
I do think it's worth noting that we are filming this about 2.5 weeks after the proposed settlement was announced. So
And
it's
still
not
proposed.
it is
Yep.
still proposed. It is not
Yep.
it is not brand new, but it is still a lot of questions, not answers.
Yep.
So some of what I'm going to say may be informed when things are more settled.
Right.
So my first thought about the NAR settlement is, wow. Definitely was not what I expected to be spending the last 2 weeks deep diving into, reading the actual proposed settlement and listening to a lot of other thought leaders about what could happen. I think it's important to have perspective. So I don't know if you know this, but I used to be a teacher. And
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I taught,
Okay.
I taught high school. And one of my subjects was history.
Okay.
And so I do think sometimes, especially when it's a time of uncertainty,
Yep.
it doesn't hurt to look back to history and
Yep.
what models there are. So I think that many people don't realize that, definitely not the general public, but even some realtors don't realize that the National Association of Realtors is actually the largest lobbying group in America
Oh, interesting.
in terms of money. Okay. And what do we do when we also want to uncover the truth of something is, follow the money. So historically, the United States has a track record of busting large unions, right, and protecting competition and that sort of thing. So NAR, being the biggest lobbying group, is kind of akin to a union. And so I think what has just happened, and we just need to put it in perspective, is NAR just got union busted.
Interesting.
Okay. But let's think about it a little more. What does NAR lobby for, right? Lobbies for individual homeownership rights. Again, general public doesn't know this, even some realtors don't. I was very active with the policy and governance and advocacy groups here in Austin with the Board of Realtors. So I have some, perspective on that. I have seen NAR and the state groups and local groups lobby for things like preventing rent control or, preventing a sales tax on real estate transactions, which would have been an additional tax on our commissions. So it's a very, very powerful lobbying group. So if it's a powerful lobbying group advocating for individual homeownership, who would want to bust that up?
Tell us.
Do you have thoughts? I have
Well,
thoughts.
I've got thoughts, and I think from different perspectives, you and I are going to align on what's going on here.
I just think what we're seeing is, corporations have determined that real estate is a great business model for them. And you can't be advocating for individual homeownerships and corporate homeownership. So corporations, following the money, were on board with helping bust NAR up.
So let's I think that we probably skipped a step here for the audience on so the NAR settlement making it harder for maybe individual people to get into homes.
I think it definitely will.
Right. Okay, so that's the missing piece that
Okay.
I want to drill into on
Well,
why.
I think that's unfortunate.
Okay, so on what specific elements of the settlement do you think are going to make it more difficult for agents? Is it the commission split? Is it the way the commission is going to be financed? Is it, what elements of that do you think are going to affect the brokerages and the agents?
Well, I think, there's a lot of hypotheticals still. But
Absolutely.
What we are seeing is buyers will, agents will have to have a buyer representation agreement signed before they can show someone a home. So you're going to get a very big range of skill that agents have in being able to communicate their value. And, typically the buyer's rep agreement has come with a certain level of compensation. I think it's fair to say that certain level of compensation will be all over the place based on, in part, the skill level of the agent being able to articulate their value to that buyer. I think about like my kids, right? I have 22-year-old son and daughter-in-law.
Yeah.
And they are probably going to be among the type of buyer who will be not interested in paying out of pocket because they will be so busy saving for their down payment.
Right.
So a realtor that isn't really able to articulate their value and charge very much for buyer representation, well, that's also going to be a buyer's agent who isn't able to advocate very clearly for their client.
Right.
So those clients are going to be served at a deficit. The clients who need to be advocated for the most.
Right, exactly. Because there's this market dynamic of if the price has got to come down, the service level has got to come down.
Right. I think that will happen.
Yep.
And unfortunately, there's also, the other trend going on is just, a lot of kids that age, like, sorry, I call them kids. A lot of young people don't see themselves as homeowners. And they just don't see how they would ever save that money. And they're going to see, now I've got to pay a buyer's agent commission. That's just another nail in the coffin of me being able to become a homeowner.
It's one more barrier.
Right. And so we're going to see, I see it happening already. I think it's going to increase. There's a whole percentage of the population that just won't even try to be homeowners. They're satisfied as renters. Like they can just check off the dream of ownership. I don't have to worry about the dream of home ownership. I can focus on other things. And these corporate landowners are going to be very happy to be corporate landlords and prevent these young people from ever becoming homeowners.
This is we might end up all over the place, and I want to try and I want to try and make this logical for the audience. But
Sure.
I think the part that I agree with you on is that institutions becoming large landowners. I think that's dangerous, right? Because I do think so much of the American dream has been wrapped up in your home being your primary mechanism for accumulating wealth. And if we remove that, then all of a sudden other portions of the economy need to be rewired so that people have the capacity to just retire. Right. let alone own a home, right? Because that is nice, right? But retiring is what's going to happen.
Well, even to that point, yes,
Right.
I agree with that. But even more, it's not just the dream of homeownership from a financial end game. It's also, homeowners are more likely to vote. Homeowners are more likely to be engaged in their communities. And if we become a nation of renters, who benefits from the populace not voting and not being engaged in their communities? It's not great. And when the media publishes articles and they hold up how real estate is done in other countries, I encourage people to go look at the homeownership rate in some of those other countries.
That structure is very, very different. Yeah, I've got friends in Germany, and it is much more it's very different.
Yeah.
I'll just leave it there.
And I don't know that it's.
Yeah.
A lot of the media came out and saying pointing out that it's desirable to change to that, and I would just say I'm not sure it is.
Maybe we'll make it specific to you. Are you repositioning any components of your business already to try and deal with this? Or are you more just hey, this isn't totally going to affect me because my clients aren't necessarily these people? How are you bringing this from macro to micro?
Well, I think the first thing you need to do, or first thing that I did was really educate myself and
Yep.
try to get a foundation under me. And because it's still proposed, we don't really know
Right.
where it's going to end up. But anytime there's a major news story about your industry
Yeah.
and you are actively talking with people who that might affect,
Yeah.
I think it's important to be able to have those conversations. So I know people don't like the word scripts, but I really spent a lot of time as I read articles and listened to some people on podcasts, I had a Google Doc open, and when I heard something
absolutely.
that made sense to me,
Yeah.
I put it in the Google Doc, and then I kind of came back and massaged some of that. I have about a dozen sellers under contract right now, in different phases of like just about to list or listing in 2 weeks, kind of my spring listings. And so that was interesting because they had all signed agreements at different phases. Then this news broke, and I thought, well, are they all going to call me and want to renegotiate the commissions or erase
have any
commissions?
of them wanted to?
No, I've had one out of the dozen reach out and say, hey, does this impact me at all?
Yep.
And we had a conversation about it. But no, it's been fairly non-issue. My best friend, who's a director at Dell and, very, very smart, financially savvy, I talked to her about 10 days after the news broke. She hadn't even heard about it. So I think sometimes we in our own industry I think we have to over-prepare, but we can make things a bigger deal to our clients than it actually is. And we have to be on guard for that. So we have to be ready for the tough conversations, but they may not occur.
Well, you have to imagine that if people inside the real estate industry are confused about what's happening, most of the calls that I've got from people, because my network is broadly like technology people, right? Marketing and developers and that kind of thing at technology companies. And I get these calls that are like, what is happening?
You okay?
Yeah, that you okay? Like no, we're gonna be fine.
Yeah.
But which is the first thing that I'd say to the audience, we're gonna be fine. Us as an industry are gonna be fine. But if they're confused, right, and they're sort of like the normal media consumer, then yeah.
Well, I think the media really got it wrong on most of the articles I read about the proposed settlement, in the sense that that there's this sense that the removing the 6% or uncoupling the buyer's commission from the listing commission is going to result in a reduced home price. I don't understand that. I don't think that will happen. I think what will happen is some sellers may decide to pay a lesser buyer commission than they typically might have, because this news has made them feel powerful in that.
Have you, just as an aside, have you heard anyone like give voice to that?
That the sellers are going to do that?
Yeah.
No, in fact, my sellers have been like, just stay the course.
Right.
People got to get paid.
Right.
But part of that is positioning and languaging by me. I think that's possible. There will be realtors who think that's going to be their angle to take the listing, is to tell the seller, you don't have to pay them. So I mean, like,
so rather than
there's anything is possible in this industry.
So rather than articulating a clear value statement, just be like, we're going to make this cheaper by trying to take out the other side of the
transaction. There are
transaction.
realtors now who are listing at, a percentage rate I would not personally run my business at.
Yep.
And I compete against them, and, I do fine. So
Yep.
there's always going to be a chance, right?
Right.
So, but let's just take that scenario, which I don't think will be widespread, but I think it will happen. There will be people that are kind of encouraging the seller to, not pay the buyer's agent. Pay me, but stick it to them. That seller is not then going to say, oh, well, I'm saving $24,000 in the buyer's agent commission. Reduce my house, reduce the price by that much. No, that seller is going to keep the money. So my point is, the media that says this is going to reduce home prices, they are wrong. Like, the market handles what a home is priced at. It's not the commission rate. So I think that's just a gross, misgeneralization that we have to be prepared to educate the public on.
This is an interesting point that I don't know if I've thought specifically about, but my initial reaction to this is, one, just watching the last batch of interest rate changes, and then how, interestingly, like, slowly I thought that home prices reacted to that. So the Fed was very intentionally trying to cool the housing market, right? But they actually are playing a much longer term game than I think that maybe we think they are. Like, our attention span is a little bit shorter than theirs, right? So they've got to like torture the market a little bit longer than we would like to get the prices to change, right? So for anyone that thinks that this is going to be like internalized by the market and things are going to shift on the dime, like, no, not at all. Like, could in 5 years prices be a little bit lower because the business models underneath between the buyer and seller have adjusted a little bit? Maybe, but I think you'd have a hard time teasing out what is the change in underlying value versus the change in the compensation structure.
Correct. Because, remember, in most markets, we're still fighting inventory battles.
Right.
So yeah, there's
That's
so many factors.
the supply side is going to like, govern that way more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I do think that, as an industry, we have not done a good job of showing our value to the media and to the consumers and the general public. When we say, we blast it across social media, this house sold for $25,000 over the asking price, sold in 3 days. Okay, folks, you did not take that listing and 3 days later it sold. Okay, it may have sold up 3 days on the market, but we are not doing a good job of articulating all the value we bring in order to make that 3-day offer happen.
Right.
Like, I have a listing right now. I signed the paperwork in October. It just hit the market 2 weeks ago. Clients are out of state. I have worked on that house. I have caretaken that house. I have done repairs on that house on their behalf. I have had it mowed. I mean, like, yes, we are now under contract, 8 days on the market, but that's months of my work and attention that it took to lead up to that. So some of this is, again, I think I said in one of our other episodes, the media loves to take whatever's on top and take it to the bottom. And as an industry, we kind of let our swagger make us a target.
Right. And I think I really want to underline this. Like, there's a recurring theme that I've been harping on, which is basically this sort of marketing fundamental of like expressing your value, right? How are you different from other agents, right? Because that's going to allow you to charge more, but just also from an industry level, like, really demonstrating the amount of work. And so, I've heard other commentators out there like sort of satirize the agent that it like is sort of making it look easy and then posting the Instagram thing and look at me, I made a big commission check, and like that is not necessarily bringing it home for
it's clearly not resonating.
right exactly,
because even the president of the United States took a shot at realtors, so I mean, like, that does not work.
You're the second guest to bring up if the president of the United States says, I forget the exact quote.
Well, it wasn't factual, so so it showed a lot.
Well, I mean, and that's sometimes it's like, it's like the meta can be more important than the message.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, okay, president of the United States says something that was not accurate about real estate agents. It's like, okay, we have a
perception problem.
Right. Exactly. Not a like maybe factual problem,
correct,
but like perception equals reality. And if this is how it's internalized by the market, you have a problem, right? And it's going to take a while to fix. So my perception on the, like, let's say the buyer's agreements, which I'm really super interested to get your feedback on. But my first reaction to that was, this might actually be really healthy.
Oh, I think so. And I think it can really level the playing field for those of us. Now, some states have always required buyer's rep agreements.
Yeah.
So if you're a realtor in one of those states, I know we sound like lunatics that we haven't been using them. I don't know. You were right all along. You should probably have one of them on the show.
Right, exactly.
Like, I talk to those realtors. And
if you're one of those realtors, leave a comment down below. We want to talk to you.
Yeah, because like when I talk to realtors in those states, they're like, what do you mean? Why is there a hubbub? Why would you not use one? Like, they're so like breathing to them.
Yeah.
But I personally shifted from using them haphazardly to using them religiously during the pandemic. So I look at myself as, this is the experience of an old dog learning a new trick. So it can be done.
So you were on this before.
Yes, I shifted before, partially just because the volume of buyer tire kickers, in Austin pandemic, it was insane. And I had to get control of it. Like, it was no longer something that, oh yeah, I should do that. It would be smart to do that. It was like, no, something has got to change. And I was working with a great coach, Todd Tremonti. He helped me see like how you can do this. And I have not wavered from it since I started. So it's been huge. And I think that when the industry as a whole is required to use them, it will level the playing field. So those of us that use them aren't kind of competing against people that will drop what they're doing and go show a house at 4 p.m. without a conversation.
I think there's a lot of fear around the buyer's agreement. And so
I felt it myself.
One of the questions, what were you afraid the buyer was going to say when you basically had this piece of paper or DocuSign?
Yeah.
And it's like, this is my buyer's agreement, versus what actually happened?
Well, first of all, I just felt like it would feel too formal. It would be, off-putting. And then I mean, even now, like when I say my fears out loud, they're so far from what happened that I'm
Right.
laughing at myself. It's hard to remember what my fears were, but
But there's probably a lot of people watching right now that
Yeah.
are like, no, this is exactly what I'm afraid of.
Yeah, yeah. So I was worried it would feel like the cart before the horse. It would feel high pressure. It
Right.
would feel just too much. And I mean, think about it. If you went to a divorce attorney today, what would they want to take you on as a client? They'd want a letter of engagement.
Right.
They'd want you to sign saying they're aware that you'd want something saying, I'm aware, I'm your lawyer. I'm aware you're my client.
Yep.
So I think that a lot of realtors are so afraid to just say, here's what you get when I work for you. When we establish a working relationship, here's what you're going to get. Here's what it's going to cost. That you're so afraid to say that and articulate that you're hoping nobody notices. You're hoping to like sneak your commission in there. And I think that that's not transparent, and it does deserve to stop.
That's right.
Like,
That's right.
we can have square conversations. And for every buyer, for the realtors not using buyer representation agreements, for every buyer that's bought somewhere else, they went to an open house and bought, they went to a builder and bought, that's a function of you not signing a contract and having, like, you thought they were your client, they didn't think they were yours.
Right.
So like, let's just acknowledge that clarity, it may mean you have less phantom buyers or fictitious buyers, but it'll mean the buyers you have understand you're working together and they see your value.
There's technology now that will help people see those phantom buyers. And that has been interesting as people that have been exposed to that technology realize like what's being left on the table. And rather than like having some revolutionary thought, basically it just reiterates the whole like speed to lead and like foundations that like the underpin like the basics of the business.
Sure. I was listening to Greg Harrelson. It might have been on a Keeping It Real episode, but
Yep.
I was listening just earlier this week, and he was saying that the speed to lead matters because,
Yes.
in a sense, if you are the last to talk to a buyer and someone that was skilled enough to help them understand what representation brought to them, they really are
Right.
off the table for you if you're late.
Right.
So I would say the caveat to that is it doesn't matter if you're the
Yep.
first one to speak to them if you're not articulating any value.
Right.
Because they can still pass. It's not like whoever speaks to that person first automatically gets them. You have
Right.
to earn that client fiduciary relationship.
Right. Right.
So that's a misconception I see with the buyer rep agreements in the past. Some people have thought, well, I can't just have that conversation out of nowhere. And it's like, no, you're not supposed to have it out of nowhere.
Yeah.
You're supposed to first have a conversation, determine what that buyer is looking for, and determine if you're a fit to meet their needs. Then you have the conversation
Right.
about like making this official.
I think, Greg has been absolutely fascinating. So for everyone watching, like Greg streams live in the Real Geeks Mastermind group every week on Tuesday. And his last couple of sessions on, NAR have been truly fascinating. And I think that, he might say something along the lines of, you not only need to be first, like in that speed to lead, but you also need to be the best.
That's right.
And so it's not just I need to be fast, like you said, sort of like playing the Zillow, like, oh, I got to answer my phone, thing. It's like once you're on the phone, you then have to be able to articulate your value in the right way.
That's right.
To get them to want to sign that contract with you.
So people that have been afraid to use buyer rep agreements, sometimes they may feel like they have what it takes to work with that buyer. They have
Yep.
the competence level. They can articulate their value, but they haven't been able to beat some of these, pop-up realtors that will meet them at the door at 4:00. And like,
Right.
then that client or that buyer gets kind of roped into signing something with maybe someone that's not as sophisticated or not as good.
Right.
So that's why I think leveling the playing field is not a bad thing. because yes, we can't just, wait around all day, but everybody's going to have a buyer rep agreement signed. So if that first agent that's willing to do whatever isn't also good, it takes away our need to compete with pop-up.
So I think that this is going to drive a level of transparency to the buyer that I think we hoped was there, but it probably wasn't there. I mean, they're signing a lot of documents with a lot of numbers on it, like when they're doing these huge transactions. And so they might not totally be aware of how much money they're spending on commission, right? And so now they're going to be more aware. And so more customers are going to think, did I get value for that money? Right. And I think that is going to be, one of those moments that it's going to be important for the industry, right? Because we were talking about, reputation problems that the industry has, right? And perception problems that the industry has, right? And so now it's not just like you have to be good. It's like we almost need to like try and lift up the agents that might not be.
Yes.
So that like everyone in the industry has a good experience.
Or we could have higher barriers of entry to join the profession, but yes.
Interesting. Okay, this is the episode of Hot Takes,
true.
But let's
I read a study, and it said one of the biggest complaints that buyers had after they bought their home was that the realtor didn't really do very much for them because they found the home they eventually bought on the internet. And I think that is definitely highlights or it's an example of just what you're saying. If the buyer perception is all an agent does is find the home, that if I saw it on, Zillow first, that agent didn't do their job, we have not articulated our value. We did not explain that, we looked up the deed restrictions. We gave them information, hopefully, on how price your offer strategy should be based on comparables. We negotiated. We got through the inspection. That list of vendors, that was cultivated after my 2 decades of experience in this industry, that you didn't have to call a plumber out of the phone book to get an estimate during your inspection, right? Like there's so many touch points that you said earlier, we make it look easy.
Right.
We should have it be an easy experience for our clients, but we need to do a better job of noting that it's easy because of our experience and expertise.
This is like, my wife likes to watch Selling Sunset.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, right, exactly. And I don't think I like it. And I actually don't think that, thinking through this now with you, like I think I'm actively forming an opinion that I think it's bad for the industry.
It's very bad.
Because it's making this perception that real estate agents are a certain way and that like the business of real estate is less than, what they're portraying on the show, which is like intentional drama because producers rev that shit up. But there's so much going on in behind the scenes that the buyer doesn't see, so that they can have it's already stressful for them. We know that, but like the agent is taking a lot of that stress off by working in the background on things. And that would make for a really horrible reality TV show.
I agree. It's horrible to live in at times.
Right, exactly. But the people that are experiencing the industry aren't necessarily seeing what's happening, right?
Right. So I would say the relationship to reality that a show like Selling Sunset has, it's no different than on the HGTV home remodel shows where the couple goes away and then a weekend later, like their kitchen is completely remodeled. Now, having just gone through a kitchen remodel, it does not happen that way, right? So it sets a completely outlandishly false expectation of what the job really is.
Okay, so I want to come back to some of the hot takes and economic fallout and because we've talked about, we've talked about potential buyer seller splits and, maybe we can just game out here. Like I should probably actually start by saying, like, in my opinion, I think long term this is probably going to be good for the industry. I think that there might be some agents that are like part-time agents that it turns out that this is like not for them anymore because you have to be a little bit more serious about it. It's got to be like your main thing. And you actually have talked about that a little bit in our other episodes. But I do think that there is like broader trends inside the U.S. economy that we need to be, which we already sort of touched on, but we need to be like aware of. Right? Not just at like an industry level, but like, hey, all of us as Americans, like we should probably be thinking about like, is it healthy that kids don't want to buy homes? that kind of stuff.
Right. I agree. And I mean, I'm a parent of young adults, and most of my friends have kids the same age, and it's shocking to me to see how many of them do not believe homeownership is in their future, and they're not even going to try.
Right.
When on the other hand, I know like there are loan programs where instead of like my daughter's about to graduate from college, well, instead of asking people to send her, $50 or $100 check or, a house plant as a gift, there's a loan program where she can send out the link and people can actually contribute to her someday down payment on a home.
Interesting.
And the mortgage company will actually match up to $2,000 of that money.
Oh, interesting.
So, I mean, like there's ways to make ownership accessible, but I think the larger media is helping kids not be engaged with that. And I think it's a huge mistake. When you look at what is the number one way to build generational wealth historically,
right?
History teacher, it's through homeownership. So if we just remove that for an entire generation, who is going to have that wealth? Because it will still happen.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So you're starting to get into the things that I actually spend a lot of time, thinking about, right? Interesting data that I've seen is that like the demand seems to still be there, right? So it's almost like we have a supply problem of homes in the United States. And when you ask people, like they do these big studies, surveys, you find out that they want homes, they want to be homeowners, but it's like the mechanics of it that are the barrier. And also just the strict like financials, of it, right? And you and I also off camera were talking about, kind of like K-shaped recovery and stuff like that. Right. And, this is another element of it. And maybe we can pull at this, high interest rates don't affect a cash buyer. So whether that's an institution or someone that is just, at the back half of their lifespan, has their nest egg really well established, they want to move from point A to point B, loan is not a factor because they're
that age appropriate cash buyer at the end of their earning stream.
Right.
They're also buying second homes,
right.
Which obviously the cash, they're not affected by the interest rate, but their second home purchase impacts our inventory pretty dramatically.
Interesting. I was having a similar conversation this weekend, and someone was speculating on a large wealth transfer between, boomers and later generations as, sadly, they start to pass away.
Sure.
And they were saying, well, maybe that will just like re-level things. And I was like, well, first of all, grim. But second, like, I don't know. I don't actually think that's like the solution that an older generation is going to age out and then homes are going to become available because, and maybe let me just, expand on this a little bit. The U.S. population has always been very transient, right? We've been able to pick up and move from Washington to Texas, as both of us have.
Yes.
And
the Great Migration.
Yeah, exactly. And that's not really a problem. So if there's a wealth transfer where people then can't move homes or it's like very costly to do so, then again, that starts to feel a little bit more like a European system.
The other thing I would want to know, because I haven't researched this, but I would want to know is what percentage of the boomers who are on this trajectory, so I don't know how to say it politely, but how many of them are in reverse mortgages? So those homes aren't owned free and clear.
Exactly.
How many of them their home is their greatest asset and it really isn't that much money? I mean, I work with a lot of people, I mean, a fair amount of people that, a parent has died and that home is to be sold. And each of the family members are only getting, I mean, they're not going to go buy homes after that one house sells. So in order to transfer the home, to the next generation, it would have to mean, there's maybe only one heir in that family.
Right.
So I mean,
it's not a 1-to-1.
No, it's not. Yeah. So I don't know that I buy that, and I know a lot of people that are baby boomers, did not manage their money well, and they're not liquid. I mean, they're not all going to die with enough wealth to re-engage the next generation.
Right.
So I don't know the percentages on that, but I would want to know all that before I bought that.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. Interesting.
Also, I think a lot of baby boomers have kind of clicked over to realizing they have enough. There's enough,
Yeah.
financial plan trajectories. They feel comfortable, and they're starting to spend They're starting to spend the inheritance.
Right.
Which, I mean, I know for my own mom, I support. Like, she really wants to go to Italy this summer,
Yeah.
and I've just been like, I'll help you figure it out. Let's rent the villa. I mean, her money, not mine. But like, she's never historically been a spender, but
Right.
she's aging into a point where, according to the financial projections, she's okay. She's starting to spend that money instead of what I call hoarding your retirement,
Right.
which I support. Like, I
Right.
don't want to get rich off of her retirement. So I think that's also a trend happening, is the younger boomers are like, you only live once.
Which that's an interesting feature that I hadn't quite talked about or thought about, but applying my college economics courses, it seems like cash flowing is very healthy. Cash flowing, yeah.
And so a lot of boomers, one of their retirement strategies is to buy an investment property. So
Right.
they have that monthly cash flow. Well, that's the tenant in that property is not a buyer.
Right.
Right? So we've got the corporate entities entering landlord at a very high level, but on a individual level, a lot of baby boomers have thought that's a great way to enhance my retirement. So the housing inventory available for first-time buyers is pinched on both sides.
Right. So here's a question that I've had. I think looking at the data and looking at a lot of the news stories, it's not really arguable that there's large institutions like BlackRock, acquiring massive portfolios of real estate. Have you bumped into that in terms of like actual transactions, like an institutional buyer being a buyer?
I personally haven't, but there's an entire community in Kyle, which is, 15 minutes south of here. If we were to hop on 35 right now, the entire community is corporate owned, and it's
Interesting.
every single house is a rental.
Interesting.
And it's right on 35.
Yeah.
So I think the play there is clear.
Right.
They keep the rental income coming now until the development between Austin and Kyle is consistent, and then they can develop that into commercial property.
Right.
It's a long-term play that pays off now. So no, I haven't personally seen what I can, BlackRock as a buyer.
Right.
But the article about how many homes in Texas are corporate owned, I mean, the documentation is there.
Even then, that was a data point that I hadn't heard before on like where specifically some of these like I guess tracks are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe we like try and steer this back towards something that's like maybe useful or actionable to people that are out there thinking about this, because I'm trying to reconcile the two sides of like, okay, I think there's some features here that we need to be cognizant of, but like long term, I'm pretty bullish on both the real estate industry and America.
I would agree.
Yeah.
So I just would say something to maybe people that are a little newer to the business.
Yep.
A lot of people joined the industry during the pandemic. This is my 25th year, okay?
Yeah.
It's unbelievable to me. But for all 25 years, I have been told that realtors are going to be replaced.
Yes, there we go.
Replaced by, being able to look at homes online, being able to plug in a code and open the door yourself, being able to any number of things. So am I worried that this is finally the thing that is going to replace me? No, I'm not. I just don't choose to operate that way.
Right.
If the conditions require me to be better, I will be better.
There we go.
That's my mindset.
Yeah.
If I've heard from people that are new to the business and people that have been in longer than me that are freaking out about this. And I would say if your reaction to some change in business is to freak out, I would encourage you to like take a look in the mirror and like assess what's going on in your whole 360 life, because you need to build some resilience.
Yes.
Right? Every real estate transaction has the possibility of being incredibly volatile. There are a lot of moving parts, people on the other side you can't talk to, and maybe if you're feeling this upset, you need to look at, stress reduction strategies and some things to like find your own center, because, family, friends, your community, those are the things that are most important. Business practices should not cause you to freak out.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I look at it a little bit like, there's a major highway project in my, adjacent to my neighborhood, and it's, going to take years to finish, and you never know where the traffic has been adjusted to and like how much extra you should tack on if you have to go through that intersection and all this stuff. So it's like, yes, it affects my day to day. I have to keep an eye on it. But do I have the pressure of needing to know where they're putting the culvert or where they're going to park the, concrete batch truck thing no, I don't
Right.
have to micromanage the entire thing. So what part of this proposed settlement do you need to be aware of and take seriously and know that it's going to impact your life? And which part is it's really good you're not an association executive or the guy that makes the tech behind the MLS right now?
Yeah.
They're going to be real busy, but that part doesn't really concern you.
I think maybe I'd leave the audience with this, which is I think change creates opportunity, right? And every time you see some like churning like this, it's an opportunity for, for entrenched players to get displaced and for new people to, sort of make their name, right? And so maybe I'd just say, like, you need to be thinking about, like, how are you going to take best advantage of this situation?
Right.
And we've talked about a lot of tactics and, yeah, I think people need to be intentional about it.
Absolutely. And, there will be some realtors who decide that they just don't want to have the new rules. They're at a place in their career where they can retire. Is this an opportunity for you to, partner with them on working their book of business? I mean, like, it could be as literal as that.
Yep.
It's an opportunity for you to be better.
We want to leave the audience with a question for the comments down below.
Let's think.
I want to do it.
Okay. Okay.
What is the biggest opportunity from this NAR settlement?
I like it.
They're out there.
There are.
Yeah.
And you could even break it down. Opportunity for buyers, opportunity for sellers.
That's right. That's right. Theresa, it's been awesome. Where can people find you?
Oh, you can reach me at letsmoveaustin.com.
Excellent. It's been a pleasure, everyone.
Thank you.
Like, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.